What's up, YouTube? Capital G here. Okay, so I'm going to talk about something that I've been noticing. I think that at first I thought it was just a blip, honestly, but now I'm starting to realize it's a trend, and part of it is because of some of the recently released decks. I think that we're starting to slowly see the death of Backrow. Now, I don't mean that this is going to be something permanent, but as far as this format is, it could be. What I mean is, has anybody else noticed the fact that you're starting to see a lot less of, people running? First off, Backrow overload seems to be completely dead. I think that this is due to the fact that skill drain isn't nearly as powerful as it was, because you look at, against the Dark World matchup, it does nothing. You look at it against a deck like Chaos Dragons, where it should be really good, but it seems like a lot of times Chaos Dragons, yeah, you can shut down the little monsters, but the big monsters do all the big beating, and Light Pulsar Dragon never seems to die. And there seem to be more advantages to running absolutely no Backrow or absolutely minimal than there is to running, the standard of, what Geargias or what a deck like Dino Rabbit would do, where you're generally going to try and have about 2 or 3 cards in your Backrow at any given time. For one, cards like Mystical Space Typhoon, Heavy Storm, they become absolutely useless against you. When you're playing a deck like Chaos Dragons, or you're playing a deck like MERMAIL, where, I've seen a lot of MERMAIL builds where they only run Abyss Spear, and that's pretty much it. Like, they'll run Abyss Spear and maybe Torrential, or a deck like Sea Lancer, or any type of Frogs where, Frog Monarchs, they're running just, like in my build, I only run Treacherous Trap Hole. That's it, just the one trap. All spell and trap removal is going to become dead. And not to mention, it allows you to keep all your resources on the field. So if your opponent would ever use any other monster form of mass removal, something like Black Rose or Judgment Dragon, again, that's less cards that you have to worry about. Another thing that I'm starting to realize in this format is, it seems, and this might just be a MERMAIL effect, Backrow, it seems to be harder to protect now than it was in previous formats, because, before you looked at a deck like Insectors, yeah, they could blow up tons of cards on your field, but, they at least had to invest something. You could just evac them, or book them, or torrential them, or something like that. But a deck like MERMAIL's, you know what I mean? MERMAIL's can easily just pop cards by using off-field effects, which means they're very, very hard to potentially stop. So I think that the advantages to running absolutely no Backrow are almost starting to outweigh. You look at a lot of these decks that are running minimal to no Backrow. All of them are running Trag, which means they don't have to ever worry about potentially having like a dead card at a certain time. Like, all right, let's say you have, you don't want to invest too much, so you play like Thunder King and Deep Prison. Pretty solid opening. Your opponent goes Dark Hole. Now, let's say your opponent just invests everything into putting an OTK on the field, and they OTK through the D-Prison. But if that D-Prison was a Mirror Force, you would have lived. Now, regardless, something like Gores or Trag would stop any type of OTK, or just about for the most part. So maybe that's another advantage that, that these non-Backrow playing decks, like, I guess we could throw Hieratic's in there too, are having over the standard Backrow type decks, because I'm starting to see head to head. I think that the non-Backrow decks are starting to gain the advantage. Decks like Hieratic's, Sea Lancer Frogs, they weren't played heavily, but Chaos Dragons has always had a lot of momentum. Atlanteans have a ton of momentum. Now, there is one thing to be said. These non-Backrow decks, and we could even include Agents in there for the most part, they seem to have one serious problem, and that's if someone gets a card like Macrocosmos or Dimensional Fissure out on them fairly early, because for the most part, what I've seen is these decks absolutely just suffer. They get eradicated by these cards, and I've already done videos about, how important these cards are, and that can be the one bane of these decks is, your opponent gets a card like that on you, I mean, it can be lights out. You're playing MERMAIL Atlanteans, your opponent flips over Macro, or they open with D-Fissure. What can you really do? Like, you don't really have any options in the entire deck outside of MST or, something like Heavy Storm and you had better draw them early. Otherwise, you could just be losing the game because of one card. So I want to know what you guys think ultimately of this breakdown, where you basically have right now two types of decks fighting for superiority. And I would just say that I would give the non-back row decks starting to have an advantage. There was actually a similar article written on Alter Reality Games. I'll probably link it or whatever, or you can just go there and check it out. So thank you guys for watching as always. Let me know what your thoughts on this is, and talk to you guys later.